And Randolph Rice, the attorney and spokesperson for Rachel Morin's family, is here to illuminate more of what we're learning about this case. Randolph, appreciate you making the time as always, and let's get right into it. We are now learning the suspect was allegedly lying in wait with a shovel. How do you think this witness testimony may impact the jury?
Yeah, this is really key evidence because apparently there was a boyfriend and girlfriend who were walking the trail just moments before Rachel was taken off that trail and dragged 150 feet into that tunnel you saw previously in that report. This man who was standing in the woods apparently was holding something they thought was at the time a walking stick, but turned out to be a shovel with a very distinctive orange cap on it that fortunately police were able to find a couple days later.
Were those witnesses able to positively identify the suspect?
They gave a pretty good description. He was wearing a hoodie, pulled up, sunglasses. They had some discrepancies with their description, but it was enough to at least place him in the woods because moments later, they actually saw Rachel walking the opposite direction on the trail and believed to be the last people to see her alive.
Yeah, do you think this new detail about the suspect allegedly hiding proves premeditation, something the jury needs to believe beyond a reasonable doubt to secure the first-degree murder conviction?
Oh, absolutely. This certainly shows that he was lying in wait, which is one of those key elements of premeditation to get that first-degree murder to ultimately get what they want, which is life without parole, which means he dies in a Maryland prison if he is convicted.
We understand this past week photos of the crime scene were shared in court. The images accompanied by testimony from a detective with the Harford County Sheriff's Office, a forensic service unit. How do you feel the prosecution is doing as they are laying out that evidence?
Yeah, Natasha, there was a lot of evidence in this case. And I think they did a very good job in the 6 days of testimony of laying out exactly a timeline of when Rachel was found. They covered the crime scene very, very well. The investigation obviously bogged down or got quiet for a little while, but once they were able to get that IgG information and track him to Southern Maryland, it picked back up, and it really happened very quickly. They had DNA data, and a couple hours later, they were looking for him in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Were there any other details that came out in court this past week that were new or that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the DNA was really the sort of the bow that wrapped the whole case up on Friday, where that sort of tied everything together with what they found at the crime scene, what they found at the house in Southern Maryland, which contradicts all of his statements that he made, and ultimately the items that were found on Rachel Morin link him by DNA to the killer himself.
The defense looking, meanwhile, to cast reasonable doubt by raising concerns about DNA collection methods. What do you make of this strategy? Does it hold any weight?
It really didn't hold a lot of weight because whatever the detectives did at the scene, they ultimately got to the medical examiner who said, hey, look, I did the same exact swab. So you've got two separate swabs to compare, and they all came back to Victor Martinez Hernandez.
Yeah, what outcome would the family like to see when it comes to this trial?
Well, they certainly want a guilty conviction on Monday. They're going to have closing arguments, and then ultimately the jury will start deliberating. But they want that guilty conviction, and they're looking for that life without parole so that he can never get back out and hurt another person in the United States.
And if he's in this country illegally, would he serve out that hypothetical sentence in the United States? Does that feel like justice to the Morin family?
I think it does. They certainly are happy to see that he would be locked up for the rest of his life. I think they're more concerned about not seeing him hurt anybody else because he does have a history. Remember, he was alleged to have committed a crime in El Salvador, a murder and rape there. Then he committed the crime in California. So keeping him off the streets hopefully will prevent another Rachel Morin.
Yeah, we've been blessed to speak with Patty Morin several times on this show. I know this has been such an emotional process for her and so difficult, so traumatizing to relive these details and hear new details she's never heard before. How is she doing?
Yeah, this week has certainly been tough. The autopsy photos were difficult, but they've been paying close attention to this trial. They feel that the prosecutor's doing a great job. It certainly is emotional to hear about the last moments of your daughter's life, but she is hopeful that they get justice for Rachel.
Randolph Rice, really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Natasha. Have a good weekend.
The White House